All right, on the show today, I'm joined by two amazing men, Justin Yoder and Patrick Thompson. Now husbands, these two men both came up from conservative religious households, later coming out to their families as gay, meeting each other, and then eventually dating, and eventually getting married. Both entrepreneurs, Justin previously ran a humanitarian NPO and is a successful published professional photographer in North Texas. And Patrick studied music at the University of North Texas and Berklee College of Music before starting his own business, a special event and production lighting company. Now the two have combined their creative forces and their love for the great gay outdoors and created LGBT Outdoors, an organization that encourages and enables members of the LGBTQAI plus community to get outdoors and connect with nature and the world around them while breaking down stereotypes towards LGBTQAI plus people. And their new exciting camping retreat weekend they're calling LGBT OUTDOORFEST is a fun-filled camping weekend for LGBTQAI plus people. They're going to have scheduled classes, activities, and chances to connect with others in the great gay outdoors. I'm so excited to welcome to the program, to the Out of the Closet podcast for the first time, Justin and Patrick to the show. Thank you guys. Welcome.
What's up, Andrew? Hi, thanks for having us.
Of course. Thank you guys so much. Hey, I know we're going to get into talking about the LGBT outdoors, LGBT Outdoor Fest, but before that, I want to talk about you guys a little bit, kind of some of your history, how you guys grew up, and then we'll get into how you guys dated, and then talk about this amazing organization you two have built. So thank you guys for joining us on the show. And Justin, if you could kind of tell us about how you grew up, your upbringing, how your household was, and all that fun stuff.
Sure, I'll be glad to, and try to keep it as short as I can, because that's go on for about an hour just in itself. But I grew up in Missouri on my grandparents' farm. Always loved the outdoors. Nature was a big part of everyday life, really there. I knew that I was gay from a very young age, before puberty even, I just knew that I was different. There was something different about me, but grew up in a very conservative family. My dad actually grew up Amish, and so very conservative, and was always taught, gay people are going to hell. And so that wasn't anything I was going to share with anybody. And over time, I just kept that to myself. But I was who I was, and I still loved the outdoors and everything. I think it was 2001, I started a nonprofit that did AIDS and HIV relief work with kids in Africa, and that became my full-time job. Africa and photography was a big passion of mine since I was a little kid. And that was going great. I actually ended up marrying a woman during that time too. That didn't last long, which is a whole other story.
Yeah.
But when we ended things and I came out, my board for that nonprofit decided I wasn't fit to run the nonprofit. So that got shut down. And was shortly after that I met Patrick. Still not out. This was 2010, beginning of 2010. And still wasn't out at this time. It was really hard for me to try to reconcile my head with my heart. And he convinced me to go on a date with him. It took quite a bit of work, but through that first date, I really saw God all over it, which really even confused my mind and my heart even more. Just because, like, one little example of things that happened was, there was a song on the radio that as I parked my car at his apartment complex, the lyrics was, like airplanes in the night sky, I could really use a wish right now. I turned off my car. I was like, God, I don't know about wishes, but I really could use some answered prayers. And that night, out of all the places that Patrick could have taken me on a date, we went to Bachman Lake, and all evening as we were having this picnic, airplanes were just landing at Love Field over our right over our head.
Yeah.
And it was just like God was like, hey, I'm in this. So that's kind of in a nutshell about how I grew up, and we ended up meeting through a mutual friend.
That sounds kind of crazy. I mean, especially coming up in that I mean, talk about conservative household, the Amish. I mean, if you come up with your father, you know, being raised Amish, I'm sure that in itself was one thing. Then you're doing this humanitarian aid work, you know, and doing what you think is the right thing, but then you're ousted out of that organization as well. So I'm sure, you know, even accepting this first date felt risky, you know,
Oh yeah.
to some level. And Patrick, how did that come about? I mean, how was your experience growing up? Was it kind of the same?
It's a little bit different. I started off kind of in a little bit more, like, definitely like conservative household, but more progressive in comparison. Grew up Episcopalian. Yeah, a little bit. I grew up Episcopalian / Lutheran.
Okay.
Which denominations right now are definitely on the progressive side. They weren't quite there in the mid 90s when I was growing up. This is also in kind of the height of like the AIDS pandemic.
Right.
So there was a lot of like fear and misinformation that my parents were absorbing at that time.
True. And I think that's true with all of our parents, you know, growing up and especially raised the same time we were, you know, our parents, that's all they heard. So that was their biggest fear, it seemed like, you know, at least from my standpoint too.
Right. Absolutely. And in the middle of it, it was rough. Like they took me to like counseling. Like we're a very like faith-based family. I gotta tell the story. They took me to a counselor, literally like out in the middle of nowhere. We drive up. It's a log cabin. The guy is probably like 6'6", antlers on the wall, and I promise you, he had an eye patch.
He was a pirate. Conversion therapy.
Like full blown like macho testosterone kind of thing. And I had done some work in the youth group with my church, and he starts sparring with Bible verses, which is not how Bible verses are supposed to be used. And I fast forward, like I tell that story because it's funny. It wasn't at the time, but fast forward many, many, many years later, like they are amazing. They're absolutely amazing. I understand now that their reaction in the mid 90s when I was coming out was genuinely an act of love. It was misguided, it was misinformed, but their reaction was trying to protect me. And I recognize that it wasn't fun.
Right.
And I didn't see it at the time, but that's important for me to throw out there, because they are absolutely amazing. They've been so wonderful and inclusive with Justin. It's just been
I like mine, for the record, that it's still not accepting and refuses to meet Patrick or anything like that. So
I'm right there with you. And I have, you know, my own family. I have family that's extremely supportive, and then I have some family that's not, you know. And so I think it's important to always be thankful for and show appreciation to the people that have either come around or at least trying, you know, because I do think that it, you know, the great thing about maturity is it gives you a chance to step back and realize that, you know, adults have flaws too, even your own parents. So, and we were just talking about how you guys came up in conservative religious households and just started touching on when you guys first came together on your very first date. Patrick, could you tell me a little bit more about your first date? What gave you, I guess, the gonads to ask them out?
Okay, so when we first met at my friend's pool party, I had this sort of experience I'd never like had before, and like I looked at him and like I was like, I know you. We'd never met in my entire life, but like something was like, I know you, and I knew somehow, somewhere, like you're important, or you're going to be important to me. So we hung out a couple other times, and I was like, and at this point, I had been like actively avoiding any sort of relationship, like running away, you know, but it just felt like the right thing to do. I need just to see what happens. I'm not classy by any stretch of the imagination. I went and got food and a couple drinks because I have no clue what he likes. And we went to Bachman Lake at the end of Dallas Love Field. And we watched planes land over our head. And we talked and we talked and we talked. And I don't recommend it, But I laid out every piece of baggage of my past, every piece of junk, all the ugly right there on that first date. Generally not a good idea.
Or maybe it is.
Or
maybe. Yeah.
For us.
Justin, what were you thinking when he was unloading all that baggage? Were you like, you haven't even heard my side?
Well, at this point, I still wasn't out, nor was I really planning. He had to work really hard to even get me on the date because I wasn't even planning on coming out. So
was it described as a date or was it more like a friend hangout?
That's exactly how he had to describe it. I knew to him it was more of a date, but he ended up describing it more as a friend hangout to get me to go.
Right. He duped you.
Yeah. But it worked out, obviously. Yeah.
So after that first date, how long did you guys date before the question was popped?
Like 5 years and change.
Well, you could also throw in there how many times did we break up in between.
Oh, well, that drama may have to be saved for a different show.
That's not important.
Yeah, what's important is you're here, you got through it. But I honestly, I don't think that, I think that's pretty true in a lot of gay relationships. Sometimes you have some turmoil in there, and there's the other guys that are complete whores before they get into relationships, and then there's ones that aren't, and then sometimes miss out on that. Every gay relationship I've ever encountered is all like a little snowflake. They're all a little different. They're all a little unique, and it's still beautiful. It's still gorgeous. So you guys were dating for about 4 years before you got engaged. 5 years.
Yeah.
And then who popped the question?
I did.
And was that a planned out, thought out engagement, or was it just kind of on the fly, or how did that work out?
It was relatively planned out. I used to work at Walt Disney World. I have a very big like Peter Pan syndrome, like not growing up, and very like goofy and whimsical and fantastical. Justin obviously has like a big passion for Africa and animals as well. So we planned a vacation to Walt Disney World, and I knew that I wanted to do it on that trip. So on January 8th, we went to Disney's Animal Kingdom and went into the Africa section of the park. And we had done like the safari and everything. And I found kind of a side walkway in the Africa section. And there was a little waterfall and everything. And I just pulled him over and started talking Well, I set up a camera first too, because you got to.
Yeah, you had
to. It just started talking about like us and how this was a really cool place because it's like a literal cross section of, us. It's like Africa and animals and people and serving others with like the whimsy and the fantasy of all things Disney. And so that felt like a really appropriate place to get down on a knee and ask him the question. And he said yes.
That's amazing. Yeah. And now, well, that's good news. And were you surrounded by people, or was it just the two of you and that camera? And all the animals?
It was secluded. People were like walking by, but it wasn't. I was instructed very clearly that like a flash mob or any sort of like spectacle of any sort would be frowned upon.
Oh, you see, I got those same things. Mine was more, let's plan a dance for the wedding, for the pre-wedding, for all those fun things too. Well, so you guys, so how long were you guys engaged?
3 years.
3 years? Okay.
Yeah, it was a while because I really was hoping and trying that my family would come around. So I wanted them to be there, which didn't happen. But we put it off longer than what we normally would have because we were seeing a little bit of progress and hope, but weren't able to get there. And then we just got tired of waiting. So
hey, and I'm sorry to hear that, but I will tell you, the love you guys have between each other is really beautiful, and I feel like your family is truly just missing out. I mean, they may not know it, but they really are missing out, and so I know other people feel y'all's love too. So,
and I will say this, though, while my parents aren't accepting and haven't met Patrick, both my brothers and their families have, and
amazing.
Really love him as a family member. Of course, they still think that it's a sin and all of that, but they treat him like a member of the family, and so that I'm very grateful for. And we get to go up there and see them and stuff.
That's amazing. And I think there are small strides, everybody, some people have cancel culture, in it with their family. And I think for families that try to make it work, regardless to what they face, I think says a lot, about a family, even if they have the disagreements there. So, and you guys, when you actually got married, so when did you actually get married? When was the date?
April.
I was gonna wait to see if I remembered.
April 23rd, 2017.
Okay, and then did you guys get married in a chapel outside? What happened?
So we got married on a rooftop in Deep Ellum. So downtown Dallas was kind of our backdrop to our ceremony.
Other than growing up, you guys have always lived in the DFW area?
Yeah, for me, Patrick's jumped around quite a bit.
I grew up in Houston, lived in Denton, Orlando for a handful of years, but North Texas, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, all right, guys. Well, I want to talk about a little bit about LGBT outdoors, how that came to be, and the amazing LGBT Outdoor Fest that's coming up here in September. I want to talk all about that. We're going to have a quick 1 minute little break real quick, and then we'll come back and we'll talk all about that. And we can tell all of our listeners how they can get involved in the LGBT Outdoor Fest coming up soon. We'll be right back in just a minute.
It's MYSTIKKA MASALA, owner of the most famous drag queen food truck and the winner of the Great Food Truck Race on Food Network. Now you can get my extremely tasty MYSTIKKA MASALA spices and spice blends. The same spices we used in my award-winning dishes, featured on Food Network, even my famous tikka masala blend and my savory and spicy tandoori blend. Plus, my free recipes on the back of every package. Just log on to dragfoodtruck.com. That's dragfoodtruck.com. Enter OOTC at checkout for 15% off.